My dad worked in the offshore drilling industry in Nigeria in the 90s, and him and some French company men were heading out on a platform when they got boarded by pirates. 5 Frenchmen got beheaded before my dad and the rest of the crew took the ship back. He told me about this when I asked him if he ever killed someone. He said he didn't know, but when you smack a dude with an iron bar and he falls into the sea and doesn't come back up, he might be dead. He still has nightmares about it. The company he worked for, Alberta Abela Catering, had a compound outside of Lagos, Nigeria. It had a 14-foot-high concrete wall with battlements, razor wire, and sniper towers. It had a full-time security staff of mercenaries from somewhere, I think it was the Congo. And one night, the Igbo tribesmen decided to raid the compound. So, like 100 of these guys assaulted the compound, throwing thick rugs over the razor wire and having guys lay on it and their bodies run over the top. The mercenaries managed to kill all of them, and I think 5 of the mercs got killed with machetes. My dad said they were burning bodies for 2 days after that. It just goes to show how serious these people are about security, and how dangerous all of it really is. To give a little context here, for most of my life, I have endeavored to be as rational and as scientific as possible, and thus have been skeptical about the supernatural. I'm 33 now. I came to the realization that I cannot intellectually claim any certitude about whether or not supernatural entities exist, but emotionally, I believe in something. It was a hard thing to come to terms with, actually. I think I had a bit of cognitive dissonance. Rationally, these things do not exist, but I still believe that they do, if that makes any sense. My personal encounters with the ghosties are pretty mild. But when I was very young, a door slammed in the basement, in a room where my sister, cousin, best friend and I were playing. We paused, looked at each other with terror-stricken faces, then clambered over each other, trying to run upstairs as fast as we could. We all remember the encounter to this day. Another time, I walked downstairs and saw my deceased grandfather's old rocking chair rocking back and forth by itself. Now this thing is really heavy. I mean, it's like a rocking chair built for industrial purposes. Thick, heavy wood, and it is a rocking back and forth. Full swing. There was no one else in the basement, so I thought that perhaps my cat had been sleeping on it and jumped off, and was hiding somewhere. After all, she did sleep there on occasion. A few months later, I saw my cat jump off the thing. She was on the very edge of the seat, which I imagine would create the most leverage for rocking. It did not budge an inch. But the story I wanted to tell you was one that happened to one of my friend's fathers, Vance. Vance is the quintessential outdoorsman. I would be hard-pressed to choose between him or Lestrade if I were ever lost in the woods and got to choose someone to be lost with me. He is a special needs teaching aide. Suffice to say, he is one of the nicest human beings that I have ever had the pleasure of knowing, and I have never known him to lie or exaggerate for that matter. He told the story just like he told his funny stories. He laughed throughout the whole thing, as if he couldn't believe what had happened to him. Anyway, in his younger years, he and one of his friends took a job for the Canadian government, where they had to catalogue an old ferry wreck in a lake in British Columbia somewhere. Apparently, sometime in the late 1800s, I know, nice and vague. It had sunk a bunch of passengers who obviously died, or something along those lines. I would imagine it was sometime during the gold rush when ramshackle business popped out of nowhere. I cannot remember exactly, but I think he said it was Pigeon Lake, not the one in Alberta, but I could be wrong. No one seems to live on that lake today from my satellite views of Google Earth, but there is another lake near it that seems to be a camping spot. Anyway, Vance and his friend, who are both certified divers, are driven and boated to the middle of the lake. They were the only ones there, as it was secluded, and seems to be to this day. The water is a bit murky. They have flashlights and have an alright view of things. They dive down. It may have been so deep that they had to acclimatise as to not to get the bends, but I have probably just added that myself over time. Either way, just as they're getting their first glimpse of the wreck, like something out of a horror film, a dude swims out of the scary as shit depths, rips the breathing nozzle out of Vance's mouth, takes a breath, and swims away. Both guys see and feel this. Vance puts his breathing apparatus back in his mouth. Obviously, they look at each other like, what the hell? And then head for the surface. Initially, their minds went to semi-rational places, and they thought someone had come out in another boat and dove down. So they come up all concerned for this guy who was diving to dangerous depths. I do believe they actually went back down to catalogue the wreck without further incident, because Vance is hardcore like that. Anyway, the story always scared the bejesus out of me. I would be freaked out to see a ghost, let alone one at the bottom of a lake. I was racing in the 1997/1998 Whitbread Round the World race. We were sailing through the Bass Straits that separates Australia from Tasmania. We were running downwind in about 30 knots of breeze, with a massive Code 3 spinnaker doing about 20 knots boat speed in a confused sea state. Because of the stresses and strains on the rigging, we had to send someone up to the top of the 90-foot mast to literally tie the sail to the mast. We drew straws, and I got the short one. I had to go up. It was terrifying. Pitch black in the middle of the night. No moon, no stars. You couldn't see the difference between the sky and the water. Next thing, you're up there clinging to a freezing cold aluminium pole that's doing everything it can to whip you off it. It all went to plan. right until the point where they began lowering me and I lost my grip on the rigging. Still attached to the halyard, I was flung some 40 feet from the mast and got tangled up in the rigging and banged my head against something, blacking out for a moment. We're not allowed to mention names, but one of my mates, let's call him Hero 1, made the decision to release the halyard and drop me on deck, rather than watch me get turned into a ragdoll in the rigging. I fell 50 feet to the deck. At this point, another sailor, let's call him Hero 2, literally caught me in his arms. I was semi-conscious. A third teammate, Hero 3, had medical training and was able to stabilize me. Luckily, we were only 300 miles from finish in Sydney and managed to get second for the leg. Things can go wrong really fast at sea. Sometimes we're asked to do things that are not strictly speaking safe, certainly not the norm. But going out to sea with the right people and the right equipment can sometimes make all the difference when things go wrong. I raced the Whitbread/Volvo Ocean Race 3 times. It's a 39,000 mile round-the-world odyssey that takes 9 months to complete. If you like the idea of extreme camping, you should check it out. The next edition starts soon. Half of the race happens at night, and while the next crop of sailors are out there, I'll be enjoying following them from the comfort of home.